I'm surprised they don't enforce a dress code in business class anymore. Standards have really gone down.
When everyone has access, exclusivity loses its meaning.
Business class passengers mock nobody. Until F-22 pilots request to meet her. When Rachel Monroe boarded Flight 226 to D.C. in faded jeans and a simple t-shirt, business class passengers whispered about how some people didn't understand dress codes. They had no idea they were judging Midnight Viper, a legend among fighter pilots. Flight 226's business cabin buzzed with the self-important energy of corporate warriors heading to D.C., their weapons of choice being titanium briefcases and Italian leather shoes that cost more than most monthly salaries. The atmosphere crackled with competitive networking where passengers sized each other up through brand recognition and title dropping. Outside the windows, late afternoon sun painted the tarmac gold, the same light that had illuminated countless runways where legends were born and heroes earned their wings. Rachel Monroe slipped into seat 4B, wearing faded Levi's and a plain white t-shirt that had survived too many wash cycles, her boarding pass clutched in hands that bore the calluses of stick and rudder flying. At 29, she moved with the fluid economy of someone comfortable in three-dimensional space, though her fellow passengers saw only someone who'd somehow infiltrated their corporate sanctuary. What they couldn't see were the battles carved into her quiet confidence. 7 years as a test pilot at Edwards Air Force Base, 3 classified aircraft programs that pushed the boundaries of human flight, and a reputation among military aviators that bordered on mythical. Midnight Viper wasn't just a call sign, it was whispered in ready rooms from Nellis to Lakenheath, spoken with the reverence reserved for pilots who danced with death at Mach 2 and made it look effortless. But Rachel Monroe, civilian contractor heading to another Pentagon briefing, was fighting to exist beyond her legend. Her challenge wasn't professional. Defense contractors paid exceptionally well for her expertise. Her battle was personal. How do you build authentic relationships when your greatest achievements are classified? How do you connect with people who judge worth by visible success when your victories happened in restricted airspace? She was fighting to be seen as a complete person rather than a collection of redacted accomplishments. The social assessment began before Rachel found her seat. Victoria Sterling, pharmaceutical executive, made her evaluation with surgical precision. I'm surprised they're not enforcing dress codes in business class anymore. Standards really have declined. Her assistant nodded enthusiastically, recognizing an opportunity to align with power. Some people clearly don't understand the expectations that come with premium seating. David Hartwell, defense contractor CEO, caught the subtext immediately and joined the whispered campaign. When everyone has access, exclusivity loses meaning. There's a reason we pay for separation from that. Rachel had faced hostile aircraft with less emotional impact than these corporate predators. In test flying, respect was earned through skill demonstrated at the edge of human capability. Here, it was purchased through wardrobe choices and job titles. She settled into her window seat, paid for with her own consulting fees, and watched ground crews who understood that real competence existed beyond fashion statements. Some people, Victoria continued, voice pitched to Carrie, simply don't grasp appropriate professional presentation. Rachel's strategy was pure test pilot methodology. Assess the environment, identify variables, maintain mission parameters. The hostile corporate ecosystem required patience and discipline. qualities she'd mastered during years of experimental flights where premature reactions could mean catastrophic failure. She analyzed her fellow passengers with the same systematic approach she used for flight test evaluation. Victoria, insecurity masked through exclusivity enforcement, probably inherited position requiring constant validation. David, aggressive territoriality, hiding fear of irrelevance, classic alpha behavior masking deeper inadequacies. The assistant, follower seeking safety through alignment with perceived power. Everyone's fighting battles you know nothing about, she murmured, a philosophy learned through years of working with brilliant engineers whose personal struggles never appeared in technical specifications. These passengers were engaged in their own flight test. Psychological maneuvers where maintaining altitude required pushing others down. Flight attendant Sarah Chin treated Rachel with professional courtesy, clearly puzzled by the contrast between her casual appearance and business class accommodation, but too experienced to comment directly. Rachel's first attempt at civilian-professional interaction came during beverage service. She requested coffee, black, pilot style, and offered genuine appreciation that seemed to surprise Sarah. Business or consulting? Sarah asked, deploying standard conversational protocol. Pentagon briefings, Rachel answered carefully. Classified program reviews were technically accurate without revealing operational details. Heading to D.C. for technical consultations. Victoria's response was swift and calculated. Sarah, when you have time, those of us with actual business to conduct would appreciate attention to proper service standards. The comment was designed to establish hierarchy while implying Rachel's unworthiness for professional consideration. But Rachel absorbed it with the same composure she'd maintained during engine-out emergencies at 20,000 feet. Everyone's fighting battles you know nothing about, she reminded herself, though Victoria's battle appeared to be against anyone who threatened her carefully constructed superiority. The corporate warfare was escalating according to predictable patterns. The passive aggression intensified when meals were served. Rachel politely declined wine. She never drank before important briefings, and Victoria seized the tactical opportunity with predatory precision. Probably not familiar with vintage selections anyway, she stage whispered to her assistant, who giggled with practiced sycophancy. Some backgrounds simply don't include exposure to quality. David Hartwell joined the attack with corporate efficiency. It's fascinating how accessible business class has become. Really changes the atmosphere. But Sarah noticed details others missed. Rachel's hands remained steady despite the verbal bombardment, her breathing controlled, her posture alert, yet relaxed. These weren't reactions of someone intimidated. These were responses of someone who'd faced genuine pressure and developed unshakable composure under stress. "The presentation is excellent," Rachel told Sarah quietly. "Thank you for maintaining such high standards for everyone." Her grace under fire seemed to affect Sarah, who began providing extra consideration while maintaining professional neutrality with all passengers. Other business travelers began choosing sides in the unspoken class conflict. Some joined Victoria's whispered campaign, emboldened by mob dynamics and the safety of collective superiority. Others appeared uncomfortable with the targeted harassment, but lacked courage to risk becoming alternate victims. Major Kyle Bennett, traveling in civilian clothes for a Pentagon assignment, kept studying Rachel with growing recognition. Something about her bearing, Her particular brand of calm alertness under social fire triggered memories of classified briefings where certain names were spoken with hushed reverence. "Ma'am," he said quietly during a bathroom break, approaching Rachel's seat with military courtesy. "I'm sorry to intrude, but don't I know you from Edwards?" The question hung in recycled air like a flare signal. Rachel looked up from her technical manual, Advanced Flight Dynamics Theory, meeting his eyes with the careful assessment pilots used when evaluating unknown aircraft. "Depends who's asking," she replied with the operational security awareness that classified programs demanded. "Major Kyle Bennett, F-22 program," he said quietly, his voice carrying the respect reserved for genuine professionals. "If you're who I think you are, it's an honor, ma'am." The recognition sparked something in Rachel's expression, not pride, but relief at being seen accurately for the first time in hours. "Rachel Monroe," she replied simply, offering a handshake that carried the firm confidence of someone comfortable with military protocol. "Midnight Viper," Kyle breathed, his voice barely audible but filled with the awe reserved for legends. "Ma'am, your work on the X-47 program. Every pilot in the Air Force knows that story." Victoria's conversation stopped mid-sentence as she caught fragments of their exchange. The corporate predators who'd spent hours demonstrating their imagined superiority suddenly sensed a shift in tactical advantage, though they couldn't yet identify the threat to their established hierarchy. "Everyone's fighting battles you know nothing about," Rachel said softly, her signature phrase taking on new meaning as Kyle nodded with the understanding that came from shared classified experiences. As they approached D.C. airspace, Kyle made a decision that would transform the entire cabin dynamic. "Ma'am, if I may ask, we've got F-22 pilots meeting at Andrews for tomorrow's demonstration. They'd be honored if you'd consider joining us." The invitation hung in the air like afterburners at full power. Rachel glanced around the cabin, noting how conversations had quieted as passengers strained to hear details of an exchange that was clearly significant beyond their understanding. "I might be able to arrange that," she said, with the casual understatement that test pilots used when discussing achievements that would terrify normal people. Victoria's face had gone pale as she realized something important was happening. Something that suggested the woman she'd been attacking wasn't just another passenger, but someone with connections that transcended corporate hierarchies. Tommy Morrison, college student traveling with his military historian father, began recording the interaction on his phone, instinct telling him he was witnessing something extraordinary. The moment of truth arrived when Kyle's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. After reading it, his expression transformed completely. Professional excitement mixed with something approaching reverence. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly attentive cabin, "I just received confirmation from Andrews. The demonstration team wants to know if Midnight Viper would be available for a brief consultation. They've got specific questions about high alpha maneuvering that only you can answer." The words detonated through business class like a sonic boom. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward Rachel, still sitting quietly in her faded jeans. And suddenly, those casual clothes looked less like inappropriate attire and more like the practical uniform of someone who didn't need to prove anything through appearance. Victoria's complexion went ashen as understanding dawned. David Hartwell's aggressive posturing evaporated instantly, The assistant stopped mid-giggle, her sycophantic smile freezing as she realized she'd been laughing at someone whose professional reputation existed at levels they couldn't even comprehend. "Midnight Viper?" Victoria whispered, the call sign carrying weight she didn't understand but could feel in the sudden shift of cabin atmosphere. "Test pilot," Kyle explained with barely contained excitement. "But not just any test pilot. She's the one who proved the X-47 could handle combat maneuvers no computer simulation said was possible." Tommy Morrison's father, Professor James Morrison, nearly dropped his historical biography. Wait, Midnight Viper? The pilot who broke the classified altitude record? Who survived that crash at Edwards when the prototype came apart at Mach 2? "The same," Kyle confirmed, his voice filled with the respect reserved for legends who'd earned their reputation through skill rather than inheritance. "Every fighter pilot in the Air Force studies her techniques. She's revolutionized high-performance aviation." Rachel remained characteristically calm, while her true identity exploded through the cabin like shrapnel from a proximity fuse. She'd absorbed hours of calculated cruelty without defending herself, maintaining operational security even when personal dignity was under assault. "Everyone's fighting battles you know nothing about," she said quietly, looking directly at Victoria. "But sometimes those battles advance human flight capability, while others—" She let the comparison hang unfinished, more devastating for its restraint. The corporate warriors who'd spent the flight demonstrating imagined superiority were suddenly confronted with actual achievement, classified accomplishments that made their quarterly reports look like kindergarten finger-painting exercises. Victoria found her voice, though it emerged as barely a croak. We had no idea." "About what?" Rachel asked with the same gentle courtesy she'd shown throughout their attacks, her composure unshaken by recognition or vindication. "About who you are, what you've accomplished, what you represent." Victoria's expensive armor was disintegrating in real time. "We treated you with inexcusable disrespect, and you're a genuine pioneer." "I'm someone who learned that everyone's fighting battles you know nothing about," Rachel replied, her signature phrase now carrying the weight of classified heroism. "Including all of you. Your battles may be different from mine, but they're still real battles." Kyle watched this exchange with growing amazement, not just at meeting a legend, but at witnessing how that legend handled both cruelty and recognition with identical grace. "Ma'am," he said formally, "on behalf of every pilot who's benefited from your work, thank you, and I apologize for what you've endured during this flight." As Flight 2I-20X began its descent into Reagan National, the cabin atmosphere had undergone complete transformation. Passengers who'd spent hours performing corporate theater were now witnessing authentic achievement. Someone whose classified accomplishments had advanced human flight capability while they'd been arguing about dress codes and seating privileges. "Ma'am," Sarah said respectfully, approaching Rachel with professional deference that hadn't existed hours earlier, "the captain would like to invite you to visit the cockpit if you're interested." "That's very kind," Rachel nodded, accepting the gesture with characteristic humility. "I'd be honored to meet your flight crew." Kyle watched this interaction with continued amazement, understanding that he was observing someone who'd earned respect through competence rather than demanding it through position. When Rachel visited the cockpit, the transformation became visible to everyone. Captain Maria Rodriguez greeted her with the professional respect reserved for fellow aviators, and their technical conversation, audible through the open cockpit door, revealed depths of expertise that made civilian passengers reconsider everything they thought they understood about qualifications and worth. "The approach vectors look smooth," Rachel observed, studying the instrument displays with the competence of someone intimately familiar with advanced avionics. "Beautiful aircraft. I've logged simulator time in the 777 for consulting work." "Test pilot background shows," Captain Rodriguez replied with obvious respect. "Your reputation precedes you, ma'am. Every commercial pilot knows about the Midnight Viper legacy." Tommy continued recording, understanding that he was documenting something historically significant. Not just the recognition of a hero, but a masterclass in grace under pressure. Victoria approached Rachel's seat during the cockpit visit, her expensive composure completely abandoned. "I owe you an apology that transcends adequacy," she said, tears threatening her carefully applied makeup. "We treated you with unconscionable cruelty based on absolutely nothing except our own prejudices." David Hartwell joined her, his aggressive corporate persona completely deflated. "Ma'am, I work in defense contracting. I should have recognized, I should have known better than to judge based on appearance. Your work has probably saved lives I'll never know about." The assistant sat quietly, her sycophantic confidence replaced by genuine shame as she realized the magnitude of their collective failure in judgment. "Everyone's fighting battles you know nothing about," Rachel said gently, settling back into her seat with the same calm she'd maintained throughout their attacks. "But ma'am," Victoria pressed, "how can you be so gracious after what we put you through? We were horrible to you for hours." Rachel considered the question with the same analytical approach she brought to flight test evaluation. "Because I learned something important during test flying. The most dangerous moments aren't when systems fail, but when people let stress make them forget their training. You weren't being horrible people. You were people under stress reverting to learned behaviors." Kyle listened to this exchange with growing respect, understanding that true leadership meant helping others learn from failure rather than punishing them for it. "Besides," Rachel continued with a slight smile, "everyone's fighting battles you know nothing about. Your battles with insecurity, with needing to feel superior to others, those are real struggles too, even if they manifest differently from mine." As the aircraft touched down at Reagan National, Kyle stood to address the cabin with military bearing. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know you've been sharing this flight with one of America's greatest test pilots. Midnight Viper has advanced aviation technology in ways most of us will never fully understand, and she's done it with classified courage that keeps our nation safe." The cabin erupted in spontaneous applause, not the polite acknowledgement of celebrity, but the genuine recognition of someone whose invisible battles had protected their freedom while they'd been fighting over wine selections and dress codes. Rachel accepted the recognition with characteristic humility, understanding that this moment represented more than personal vindication. It was an opportunity to demonstrate that true strength lay not in demanding respect, but in earning it through competence, maintaining it through grace, and sharing it through teaching. As passengers deplaned, Victoria approached Rachel one final time, her entire demeanor transformed. "Would you would it be possible for me to learn more about your work? I want to understand what real achievement looks like." "Everyone's fighting battles you know nothing about," Rachel replied with genuine warmth. "Now you understand one of mine. But recognizing your own battles is the first step toward fighting them more effectively." Kyle accompanied Rachel to the tarmac, where F-22 pilots waited in formation, a tribute reserved for legends. Tommy's video would later go viral, showing corporate passengers realizing they'd mocked a hero. Months later, Victoria would sponsor aerospace education programs, finally understanding that worth couldn't be measured through appearance or assumptions. David would restructure his company's culture around competence rather than corporate theater. And Tommy would pursue aeronautical engineering, inspired by meeting someone whose battles advanced human flight. Sometimes the people we judge most harshly are fighting battles that push the boundaries of human capability, while we obsess over fabric choices and seating hierarchies. The strongest people are usually fighting battles you know nothing about. And sometimes those battles are fought in experimental aircraft at the edge of human possibility, by heroes who return to Earth to book commercial flights in faded jeans, carrying classified courage and public recognition with equal humility.